All right. Hello and welcome, everyone. It's been a little bit, and we are on the verge of the Sisters of Parvos coming out soon. And we know what we're going to get with galvanized mods at this point, so I thought we would talk about my top 5 favorite primaries going into the new Sisters of Parvos update, because primaries are going to be getting a lot better. This is also what I think the current top 5 best primary weapons are in the game. So we're just going to go reverse order 5 to 1. First and foremost, talking about the Ignis Wraith. The Ignis Wraith, obviously, it's been incredible for a very, very long time, and it is incredible at pretty much all levels of play. But the fancy thing that I want to talk about today is I want to talk about what this is going to look like at a base level before the new scaling even kicks in. And for that, I have done this. Basically, where applicable and where I think new mods are going to be placed into this weapon, I have toned down the mods to their kind of nerfed version, and actually in all cases it is slightly worse than their nerfed version before they get the scaling improvements, like we're going to be seeing with Galvanized Chamber, for example, which is up to 5 times, going to get an additional 30% multi-shot when it gets kills, and it's going to start at 80% multi-shot. So for all these tests, this is going to be without any of the scaling, but with less than the amount of power that we're going to have with the new mods at an absolute base level. So please keep that in mind. On the Ignis Wraith, it is only one mod, because I do think that the Ignis Wraith is only going to use Galvanized Chamber, because I don't know that it can find room for the new Condition Overload-like mod, which is Galvanized Aptitude on the rifles. I don't know if it's going to be able to find room for it, because it does use Hunter Munitions, and like it needs the 2 elemental slot, and then it also only has Viral and Heat. Obviously, with Hunter Munitions, this allows us to apply Slash, but Prime Shred has been pretty important to the Ignis Wraith for a long time. Is there some possibility that Prime Shred gets removed, or maybe Hunter Munitions gets removed for Galvanized Aptitude? Sure, it's totally possible. But without like testing it, I can't say for certain that that's probably going to be the case. I think that you're definitely switching into Galvanized Chamber, though, 100% of the time. So what we're going to do is we are going to just do a very important note here. On Excalibur, I have equipped Arcane Victory, and the nice thing about Arcane Victory is that you guys are going to be able to get a sense for the headshot kills that I get, because this is a max rank victory. So I have a 75% chance on headshot kill for the health regeneration. The health regeneration actually doesn't matter. What you will be able to see, though, is in the top right of the screen, you're going to be able to see when I get headshot kills with this weapon. So that can kind of help inform you, and also me at the end of this video, of course, on how many headshot kills we're going to be like regularly getting, and if that might be a viable way to use the on headshot kill arcane to give ourselves that huge amount of damage, which might be a way that we go with some weapons and not others, especially because we get that headshot multiplier, which for weapons that are headshotting very consistently can matter a whole lot. And actually, for that, you might have to pay a little bit closer attention, but we will also throw on Consequence, which will proc on every single headshot, so you can see how much I just am headshotting with any given one of these weapons as well. So yeah, that'll be an interesting thing to be able to look at through all these tests and stuff. The mods on my Excalibur, this is just my test cal, so the mods don't really matter, and I'm just going to make myself invincible for these tests, because it's really not about the Warframe in this video. But we are going to be throwing it up against the, the full level 180 test, not with paused AI, but just generally these opponents, which are level 180, higher than most people are going to see. Obviously not as tough as enemies that are in Steel Path, not as tough as enemies that are in Steel Path, that's correct. But it's going to give you a closer approximation of that. So, let's just jump in with the Ignis Wraith. The thing that I've noticed while testing these weapons is that even with the very slight reduction in stats, if the weapon is already good, like the Ignis Wraith is, you can pretty readily do this test. You're going to notice, some downswing, especially on the heavy units where you're going to need to focus a little bit more. But the Ignis Wraith is a weapon that needed to focus on heavy units a little bit more anyway, even before we're considering powering down its mods at all. You see a couple of enemies kind of walked off here, but you focus on a level 180 to get burned down. And obviously, because of all the punch through on this weapon, you can shoot down an entire hallway. And in this, we didn't even have to reload one time to get all the way in there. So yeah, that's what the Ignis Wraith looks like, and that's what it's pretty much gonna look like whenever we put those new mods on them, if we're not actually getting any kills. Now, the big important factor here is that we're going to get an additional 30% multi-shot on kill, and as long as the on-kill effects of these new mods and arcanes proc from the statuses of the weapons, like getting the kills, then we're going to get some really consistent increases, and we're going to be over 200% multi-shot the vast majority of the time, I'll say. So it's going to be much, much better than that whenever that new stuff comes out. And obviously just the raw power of anything that the arcanes are going to be giving us is also going to be adding on to what we're going to be seeing there. But yeah, that's the Ignis Wraith, even before all these buffs. And with a nerfed build on purpose. Now, second, we're going to be looking at the Phantasma. Now, the Phantasma is one of the weapons that I think has the largest amount of potential going into this new Sisters of Parvos update. And the reason for that is that the Phantasma is already kind of a fantastic weapon. And it is a really, really weird weapon that is going to benefit highly from these new mods. And what I mean by that is that we've got Hell's Chamber, which is the new Galvanized Hell, is going to start at 110% multi-shot and then gain up to the same amount that you would be getting out of Galvanized Chamber. But even not considering that upgrade, the Phantasma already ran Shotgun Savvy. And because it already ran Shotgun Savvy goes up to 90%. The new Galvanized Savvy is the Condition Overload mod that, if you've gotten 2 kills, is going to be giving you 80% more damage per status that you apply to your opponent, in addition to giving you 80% status chance. With the Phantasma, you apply a lot of status very, very quickly, and as long as the statuses getting the kill can proc that, you are going to be doing an astronomical amount of damage, as well as getting even more multi-shot to get even more status and just stack away. The way that the Phantasma kills people is by just giving them 50 heat procs. If you just give the enemy 50 heat procs, and then they explode from all of the heat procs. That's generally the way that this weapon has worked, and it's only going to get more deadly whenever we have the new Galvanized mods come out. And in addition to that, this is one of the weapons that in this slot here, you're going to be able to use Galvanized Acceleration, which is going to drastically increase the length of the beam of the Phantasma and allow you to essentially snipe with it and just absolutely obliterate things at very large range. That is, of course, going to require considerably more Forma. Well, I guess not considerably more, because this is the right polarity for it, but we're already looking at a D polarity just to include Galvanized Savvy. So it might be, it'll be 2 more Forma, it'll be like a 5 Forma build, which is not too terrible, but it's probably more than many people want to invest. I will, of course, definitely be trying it out. But the Phantasma, as it stands already, is just absolutely going to shred through these enemies. It's not a problem at all. It doesn't have much trouble against very high armored guys. It's just, you just give them a ton of heat procs, and then the heat procs will deal with it. Like, once the heat procs are too much, the heat procs are just too much. You can see, like, hey, 86 heat procs, goodbye. Okay, 20 heat procs, goodbye. That's what this weapon does already. This weapon already just puts the enemies in an oven. Just goodbye. The heat's too much. You perish. You are no more. Evaporated. That is the MO of this weapon at current, and it is only going to get more deadly than this. Now, moving on, we have a very familiar weapon that was nerfed not too long ago. We have the Kuva Brahma. The Kuva Brahma is still quite good, and I think that it is definitely going to benefit from Split Chamber. And I also think that this weapon is going to be one of the ones that is definitely going to be using the new Condition Overload mod, and that has a few reasons. The first reason is because the Kuva Brahma hits a good number of times and has a decent status chance, as long as, of course, you are including that plus 80% status chance. The status chance becomes pretty good. And we're already going for Hunter Munitions. And because it is a Kuva weapon and we can have heat on it inherently, that actually frees us up an elemental slot where we can be viral, heat, and then still get all of our other procs. And just getting 2 procs and getting that that Condition Overload buff is still going to be an insane amount of damage, especially whenever you consider on top of the new arcane damage. So I think the Kuva Brahma is going to be very, very powerful going in here. And of course, it is already quite able to clear this content with very few issues. Like, obviously, its range isn't what it used to be, but between hunter munitions and everything else, you're not going to be having a bad time. Like, it can still shred these enemies, no problem, and I think it will have no problem on the steel path whenever we have the new improvements to it, especially considering condition overload, and especially considering if you're going to be using a primer for condition overload in any way, shape, or form, whether that be corrosive procs from Seren or just what have you, any just given elemental applier that we have in the game, which are fairly plentiful at this point. But then beyond that, we're getting into our top 2 weapons going into this update, and the second of which is the Kuva Ogres. Now, the Kuva Ogres is very, very good right now, and not a ton is going to change here because we're just going to use, you know, rifle aptitude and the new galvanized aptitude and the new galvanized chamber. Those are the 2 mods that I see the most potential in. I don't really think that galvanized scope is going to be particularly useful, but I think the 2 mods that we're talking about here are going to be in most really good builds, with aptitude maybe being the one that is left out from time to time, depending on, you know, different circumstances and if the weapon can even fit it in the build. Of course, the Kuva Ogres does have the usual benefits of just being a Kuva weapon, and it's also really worth noting that I think that the Kuva Ogres does have the potential to switch to a different damage type in this new update. Right now, this is a Heat Kuva Ogres, but I could definitely see some other elemental making it on here, especially with, of course, you know, using the new Galvanized Aptitude if you want just an additional elemental like Magnetic maybe, especially, of course, if the Sisters of Parvos turn out to be a big threat that needs magnetic damage. Then we are probably going to see this switch to a magnetic weapon, but of course we don't know until the update is out whether or not that will be necessary. So for now, this is a Heat Ogress. But even with just this weapon is incredibly, incredibly good. It has no troubles just shredding through all of these enemies, just applying, you know, a ton of heat procs, a ton of crowd control, and of course it's going to be a little bit slower against the big heavy armor. And some of that is due to me having Savvy on here preemptively, as before that was a raw damage mod. But you consider what this looks like whenever we're talking about like scaling it all, because like it very easily dealt with the light mobs in this group, and you consider that that's going to give you just a ton of damage to go into those like tougher mobs, and I don't think it's going to have any trouble whatsoever. And even still, with the Kuva Ogres as it stands now, you use Warframes like, you know, Rhino or any kind of a buffing Warframe with this, and it's already just wreaking havoc everywhere. Now, the last weapon, and the weapon that I think is going to see the biggest pop from the new mods, is going to be the Proboscis Serens. This weapon is already, I would say, probably the single best primary in the whole game, and not shocking at all, it is going to use Galvanized Chamber and Galvanized Aptitude almost 100% certainly. This weapon is incredibly, incredibly good, and it's very weird in that Vile Acceleration, I think, is just legitimately a very good mod on this weapon, just because firing more is incredible. Although, I will say, if you are not using Vigilante supplies, I would absolutely never suggest that you bring Vile Acceleration with this, because the ammo constraints on this weapon can be pretty significant. Now, in this case, I am going to have the Simulacrum bug in the bottom right, where I have 43 arrows. But because I have that Vigilante ammo mutation, I pretty much will never run out of ammo anyway. So take that for what you will. Yeah, this weapon just absolutely ridiculous at just grouping enemies very, very quickly. Obviously, these like higher armored enemies are more of a problem, but not really much more. Like they're like once they're in the group, like they're just kind of, you know, you're kind of just vortexing them and murdering them. And you can see from the enemies that were killed, tons of ammo dropped. So it's not like I was going to run out anyway, because most of the enemies died within the first couple of arrows. And it's really worth noting that that is with none of the scaling we're about to be getting. So I think that these weapons are going to be phenomenal whenever the update comes out. I think they're actually going to be, you know, real weapons we'll want to use. And whether that's going to be, you know, with the new Dexterity Arcane mod, where we're going to get melee kills first and then maybe fire off a few of these AoE rounds into crowds to deal, you know, huge damage to those enemies. You know, throw the glaive in one direction, fire the Serenos in the other. I think there's going to be a lot of interesting decision points, and which arcane is actually going to end up being the best one, I think is going to be interesting to see. But those are my favored 5 weapons going into this update. Now, it is worth noting that there are just a couple more weapons that if you are not interested in these 5, there are a few more that I would like to just briefly mention at the end here. One of which being the Bubonico. This thing, built entirely around its alt fire, is a status hose and a very large AoE, and it has unlimited ammo by default. So this is a potentially very, very good weapon going into this update. And we have the classic Kuva Comb. The Kuva Comb, this doesn't have the AoE, but it is going to deal an incredible amount of damage. And that's just going to be bolstered by these new arcanes and new mods. And the increase in multi-shot is going to be just completely devastating for the Kuva Comb to be utilizing. And then we have, not unexpectedly at all, I'm sure by a lot of people, the Sea-Doo. The Sea-Doo already has a condition overload built into it, so it's fantastic with its alt fire. It's spreading a bunch of status anyway. So whenever you put aptitude on top of that, or rather savvy on top of that, I think it's going to be very, very deadly. And of course, the multi-shot always helps. I do think this weapon reloads just a tad slow, but other than that, I don't really have any real big complaints about it. And then, interestingly, the Stulta. So for those of you that like big one-shot weapons, I definitely would say that the Stulta is a really fantastic choice. If you were ever into the Opticore or any kind of just like big chunky weapons, the alt fire on this performs very, very well. And might be the way that we're going to be utilizing the arcane that gets headshot kills in order to bolster its power, because headshots with this are hilarious, even as it stands right now. And then, of course, the one that you always want to have that's not really a particular mention for like the new power increases, because I don't think it's really going to use any of them. But if you're looking for stuff to do, just, if you need to shoot a big target, the Rubico is always good to get. It's definitely in my kind of top 10 for primary weapons in general, because it just has so many uses, whether that's like through Profit Taker, Eidolons, etc., etc. Although Profit Taker does have a slightly different meta because of the infinite punch-through login weapon. But yeah, that's just kind of some guns and stuff to talk about going into Sisters of Parvos. Let me know what you guys think, if there's any weapons that you think are going to be really, really powerful in this new update. And I will see you next time. Bye!